Hello again, F block. All right, so we're gonna go through some inventors, but mostly we're gonna go through some thinkers. This is gonna be pretty brief. Then there's a crash course video at the end that I'll have play through this. See how that goes. And then there is a worksheet. That's what we're going to be doing today. So James Watt invented the steam engine. You probably already know the steam engine was very important first at getting water out of mines so they could get coal, but to power steam engines. But then later it was used for pretty much everything. A steam engine is essentially the power source of almost anything that's mechanical that we have today. Like the locomotive, which the first locomotive was called the Puffing Billy. It was actually the first, the maiden voyage. The Puffing Billy was the nickname. The first actual locomotive was called the Rocket. It went all of 15 miles an hour. And there was a railroad accident, the very first, when it debuted, and someone was killed. Someone was walking across the tracks, and it's not funny, but it is funny because it was only going 50 miles an hour, and it hit him and it killed him. Henry Cort invented the puddling furnace, which made stronger iron, and then Henry Bessemer did the Bessemer process that would created out of iron steel, which steel was better than iron because it was more malleable and just as strong or stronger. So, and that brought taller buildings and all that kind of stuff are only possible because of steel. You couldn't make skyscrapers out of iron. So you probably could make probably a 15-story building with iron, and with steel you can make, I don't know, hundreds of stories. I mean, we have like, I don't know how tall the tallest building is. It's like in Dubai, but it's really, really tall. Okay, so we move on to thinkers. So Adam Smith. Adam Smith is the father of our economic system in the United States and in most of the Western world, which is called capitalism. Okay, he wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations. And basically, before him, everyone thought of the best way for a country to get rich was to collect all the gold. Okay, it was called mercantilism. Basically, you wanted to have the most exports and the least amount of imports. Okay, a mercantilistic society, you did not want free trade. Adam Smith said, no, we want free trade. We want the best way for a business to do well is to increase the market so we can sell more stuff. Okay, he took Locke's ideas of a civil society and put them in his economic theory. So he wanted free trade, as I mentioned, and he saw what was called an invisible hand controlling the economy. So this invisible hand would, between supply and demand, and cost of production, all those things manage what the prices are, what wages are, all these things, what labor costs are. And essentially, with Adam Smith, I mean, this is one slide explaining a whole economic system, but basically he said, the economy runs, and it doesn't need the government controlling its economics. It can run on itself. And he, for instance, if we look at something that's going on right now, I don't know if you guys are following the news, but oil prices, okay, this is sounds crazy, okay, a barrel of oil, okay, think of those big oil barrels that you see sometimes that are like giant trash cans. A barrel filled with crude oil, which at one time in your lifetime was selling for $150, is now selling for negative money. The people who own that oil are paying people to take it away, okay? And that's because the demand for oil is in the toilet, okay? No one's driving around. No one's commuting to work. No one's flying. Airplanes are not flying as much. Cruise ships are stopped. This is all because the demand is way down. So uh, having excess supply makes its value go down. Adam Smith at work, okay? Um, on the flip side, look at Purell. Okay, Purell, which was pretty cheap. Now, if you want to buy a thing of Purell online, it is costing a lot of money. Why? Because there is a giant demand for Purell because of the coronavirus. This is just an example of Adam Smith. Okay, so Adam Smith becomes a huge influencer in the Industrial Revolution and basically all the Western world, which is basically Europe, the United States, adopt this theory. Okay, the next guy is John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill is a utilitarian. Okay, he wrote works on logic, metaphysics, history, literature, economics, and political theory, but we're going to focus on his economics. He was really smart. He learned Greek at age 3 and Latin at like age 4. Okay, these are hard languages. If you think of people learn it in high school. He was like a toddler learning this, so he's pretty smart. He was a competent logician, which means that he was good at logic. By 12, by 16, he was trained economist, and he's a utilitarian. Okay, so a utilitarian believes that the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Okay, so he wanted basically. He would probably look at the coronavirus and say, okay, if 2% of the population is going to die, but 20 million people are going to lose their jobs, we'd be better off just letting people go out and getting the virus and dying, because that's a small percentage, because people's livelihoods are being attacked. A lot of these philosophers, economic philosophers of this time, were trying basically pro-business. So he would not like this lockdown at all. He would be pretty much against the coronavirus lockdown. Karl Marx, you've probably heard of him before. He's the father of communism. Marx was the most influential socialist thinker of the 19th century. He was born in Germany. He was the son of an influential attorney. He moved to Paris. He became acquainted with the French socialist thinker and began to collaborate with him in 1844. But actually, I'm a little out of order. He was born. He studied philosophy and earned a doctorate in 1842. 1844, he moves to Paris, meets Engels. Him and Engels work together. They write a bunch of works together, most famously the Communist Manifesto. He worked in journalism, and he was a radical newspaper in Cologne, Prussia. So the Communist Manifesto, which they wrote together in 1848, it's also known as scientific socialism or Marxism. He breaks with Hegel's dialectic. So Hegel was a follower of Kant. Kant is kind of like this rule-following philosopher. And he said, so Hegel said the history of the world was unfolding God's plan for the world in a dialectic process in thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Basically, like there's a world order, then there's an attack to the world order, and then there's a new world order. For instance, we study the French Revolution, right? Before the French Revolution, the world order was absolute monarchy. Then there was the challenge, the French Revolution, and then the synthesis was what came after the revolution, which was kind of like this republic. That's kind of the idea, okay? And he offered, so Marx offered the alternative dialectic materialism and economic determinism. Basically, economy determines all. So materialism is the matter is the only reality. Therefore, God does not exist. He denounced religion. Okay, so communists do not believe in religion generally, and said that it was the opium of the people. Basically, it was a drug for people. Like people go to church as a drug, and distracted them from the hardships to distract them from the hardships of life. And then determinism means no human act is ever inevitable. Like people say, oh, the Civil War is inevitable. It would have happened no matter what. That is not the case. That is not how the world goes. And so he also believed that. Uh, Next, David Ricardo. David Ricardo came up with the iron law of wages. And he said, if you raise wages, people will use that extra money to have children, and then there will be a population explosion, and then people will starve. And so his argument was, don't do this, because if you do this, then we will have starvation and it's bad. So just don't raise people's wages. Just a good excuse not to give people a raise. Thomas Malthus believed population would outpace the food supply, and basically said, every generation's a little bit bigger, especially back then when people were having 8, 10 kids. And so the food supply is slowly growing, like arithmetically, as he said, but population is growing geometrically. So for every 1 unit of food that's growing, there are 6 more humans coming into this earth, and that it means that we are going to have starvation. And Malthus has been proved wrong because there's been so much innovation in farming and stuff like that. And so Malthus's solution to this was saying, if you're poor, don't have a lot of kids because you can't afford them. But he's wrong. I mean, food wise, the earth, scientists have figured out ways to produce a lot more food. And there's a lot of ethical questions about the food supply. So this is it for the notes. I will put up the crash course you should watch, because if I play it through this, it won't. My allotment will get too large. There's also a reading called Farm or Factory. It's pretty easy. I'm just going to give you. You just have to do the review questions. I'll put it also in the assignment. I hope you guys are all doing well. If you have any questions, if you're would like to have some sort of dialogue with me, I'm open to having office hours. So just contact me if you think you need office hours, and I will set them up for later this week, maybe after school's over. Okay, that's it.